The year is 2009. What a great year for basketball. LeBron just won his first ever MVP, Kobe just won his 4th championship. The Celtics' big three were still in their heyday. The Knicks just fired Isaiah Thomas after he destroyed the franchise. And of course, the Western Conference was as competitive as ever. In fact, look at the standings for the 2008-09 season. In particular, let's take a look at the Suns and Warriors, two teams who missed the playoffs this year. These two teams were in completely different situations. The Suns had been competing in the playoffs for a while now, trying to compete for the championship, led by their two stars, yet they've fallen short for several years in a row. On the other hand, the Warriors were still rebuilding. After their miraculous 2007 run, they've been struggling to maintain their status as a playoff team. However, there's one thing these two teams had in common. They were not sure which direction they wanted to go. In this video, let's take a look at how a mind-boggling draft day trade nearly happened, and all the details leading up to this insane negotiation between the Suns and Warriors.
With the 7th pick in the 2009 NBA Draft, the Golden State Warriors select...
Hey guys, before we continue with this video, I want to give a huge shout out to my sponsor, SeatGeek. With over 35 million downloads and over 70,000 events listed, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There's a lot of stuff going on in the near future that I plan to attend, like concerts, comedy shows, and of course, a Spurs game in November. As you can see, every ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can see the view from clicking on the seats. Green dots mean they're good deals, while red dots are not so good. I've used SeatGeek to get tickets to multiple Spurs and Mavs games, and not too long ago, I even got tickets to a Breaking Benjamin concert when they came to perform in Austin. I got a great deal, and it was an even greater time. Every single ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. Of course, you know I got you guys covered. Use my promo code ANDYHOOPS10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with my promo code ANDYHOOPS10. Click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Anyway, after the 2008-09 season concluded, the Suns and Warriors were the two most active teams over the summer, with their front office executives scrambling, calling so many teams to try and see what deals they can negotiate. The Warriors actually had a new GM at the time, Larry Riley, who got promoted in this same year, and he wanted to leave a good impression, so he was pretty aggressive in trade talks. Riley had been an NBA scout and assistant coach for most of his life, so this was an opportunity he did not take for granted. With his first summer as a general manager, he wanted to make a huge splash. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Steve Kerr, who's been the GM and the president of basketball operations for the Suns for a few years already. Unlike Riley, Kerr was on thin ice. Ever since he became the guy in charge, his decisions have been suspect and mediocre. For example, he drafted Robin Lopez and Earl Clark in back-to-back drafts. He traded away Raja Bell and Boris Diaw. But Kerr's most memorable decision has to be trading away Shawn Marion for an aging Shaquille O'Neal, a trade that was the antithesis of what this team was built on.
Shaquille's a winner, he's a champion, but he can be one of our guys who's unlike any of our other guys. Our post defense improves, we have a presence in the middle.
By acquiring Shaq, it forced the Suns to move away from their old run-and-gun style of play and become a slower, half-court oriented team. It was a trade that the fans were not too happy with either, and by missing the playoffs in 2009, it was obvious that this wasn't working the way he intended. This is how he described the feeling of being stuck. If you remember, we were kind of at the final stages of our run with Nash and Amar'e, and so we were in a difficult spot. We were looking towards the future, but we also knew we still had a team that was very competitive. Ultimately, being very competitive wasn't enough for Steve Kerr. He yearned to create something bigger, something better. Which brings us to the most valuable asset the Suns had: perennial All-Star and All-NBA player Amar'e Stoudemire.
Drives right side, gives to Stoudemire, in for the jam, and his foul. He's got some room, takes it inside, it's blocked! Huevo time! Oh, brother! Stoudemire is back.
Stoudemire's career had been a roller coaster. On paper, he was the perfect player for the Suns system. He was athletic, explosive, offensively versatile, basically the perfect big man to pair alongside Steve Nash. He also had the greatest recovery from microfracture knee surgery like ever. He came back and regained all of his athleticism. It didn't look like he lost a single step. But he was far from perfect. Stoudemire's defense has always been a weakness, and the Suns concluded the season with the 5th worst defense in the entire league. While he was the NBA's most exhilarating big man, he routinely got cooked by other bigs, especially in a stacked Western Conference with plenty of skilled, superstar-level players who Stoudemire simply did not have the capability to guard. The second issue was, Stoudemire was about to be on the final year of his contract. Well, technically he had a player option for the year after, but the rumors were he was going to opt out for a bigger payday. With this in mind, Steve Kerr could either re-sign him to an extension or trade him while his value is still very high, so he opted for the latter. As the 2009 draft approached, Kerr had his eyes set on one prospect in particular, Steph Curry. He watched him at Davidson and thought very highly of him, while most GMs were kinda hesitant to draft a player of his caliber. With his ridiculous three-point shooting and handles, Kerr thought of him as a supercharged version of Steve Nash, and if the Suns could get him, he could become the future face of the franchise. During this time, he's been in serious discussions with Warriors GM Larry Riley, so he proposed an offer. The Warriors had the 7th pick of the draft. If Curry was still available at the 7th pick, the Warriors would pick him and trade him immediately to the Suns in exchange for Amar'e Stoudemire. They had several ways to do this, since the Warriors had plenty of bad contracts they could have thrown in to make the deal work. In hindsight, this could have been a generational trade for the Suns. At the time, however, it seemed kinda crazy this deal was even on the table. Stoudemire was 26 years old, in the middle of his prime. He was already a 4-time All-Star and 3-time All-NBA player, while Curry wasn't even in the NBA yet, and he was viewed as the biggest risk of any lottery pick that year, cause nobody trusted his playstyle could translate to the pros. There was a very real chance he could have been a bust, and the Warriors get away with the greatest draft day trade in history. Hypothetically, Stoudemire would have fit very well into the Warriors' game plan. Much like the Suns, they were a very fast-paced team, with plenty of young, athletic players to run alongside him. Plus, they had a massive hole at center and power forward. A competent big man is exactly what they needed, since Andres Biedrins was not cutting it. What they did not need was another small guard like Steph Curry, because they felt like he would have been redundant. Larry Riley and the Warriors brass mulled over this offer from Kerr for a very long time, and the closer it came to draft night, the more intense the conversations became. While Riley was initially very excited about the idea of this trade, he harbored some skepticism in regards to Stoudemire. For instance, they had concerns his knee problems were bigger than the Suns were letting on. There's a reason why microfracture knee surgeries have been phased out of the NBA, because the long-term effects are severely detrimental. While Stoudemire looked like he was fine for now, there was a high possibility his knee problems would flare up once again. In retrospect, they were right. Stoudemire's knee did flare up a few years later, on the Knicks. It wasn't just his injury history that made the Warriors hesitant, but Kerr was also being very secretive about Stoudemire. He comes from an old-school line of thinking where if he decides to trade somebody, he doesn't want to tell them he's throwing his name on the table. Cause in the event a trade doesn't happen, Stoudemire might feel betrayed and upset he was on the trade block to begin with. Kerr emphasized this when he said, quote, "If I tell a player this is what's happening but he doesn't want to go there and sign, have I now lost him emotionally because he knows I tried to trade him?" These are the difficult sort of no-win propositions of being a general manager. That's why it's dicey, and you have to really sort of tread lightly in those situations. This made it quite difficult for the Warriors to navigate because Stoudemire's contract was set to expire in 1 year, yet they had no clue how he was feeling about staying with the team after that. They couldn't even talk to him. There was no guarantee he'd re-sign with the Warriors and stay there for the long haul, and if he doesn't, they literally lose the 7th pick for a 1-year rental of Stoudemire. All of this made the timing of this trade impossible to complete. How it normally goes is when a trade is accepted, the players do a physical and they have to pass it, or else one of the teams can reject the trade and revert it back. Part of the hesitancy came from Steve Kerr himself. Knowing how concerned the Warriors were about Stoudemire's knees, Kerr also became worried the trade might be reverted if he doesn't pass his physical. Had this trade been accepted and he failed his examination, it would have created such an awkward, uncomfortable locker room for the rest of the season, and potentially ruined the trade value of Stoudemire. Now, if you think about it, very rarely does a trade involving a superstar fall through due to a failed physical. We've seen it happen with role players, but much less likely a superstar. But with how skeptical the Warriors were about his health, there was a chance it could have happened here. Coach Don Nelson was widely perceived to be an innovator of the game. He was a coach who was willing to try unorthodox lineups or strategies that most coaches were not willing to do. When he coached the We Believe Warriors to victory against the #1 seed Dallas Mavericks, he utilized a small ball style of play that he himself popularized back in the 90s. But with the right personnel, it worked. Nelson was a visionary. He embraced the three-point shot long before anyone thought it was feasible. So upon hearing the negotiations between Steve Kerr and Larry Riley, Nelson stepped in and vehemently advocated for keeping the 7th pick and using it to draft Steph Curry. He saw the future, and the future was him.
Not to use it, Curry, way downtown, bang! Bang!
With Steve Kerr's plan falling through, he attempted to shop Stoudemire around to other teams, but could not find a deal by summer's end. Initially, he planned to continue shopping him until the trade deadline, but because the Suns had a bounce-back season, he decided to keep him and ride the wave, and see how they do.
Game 4 of this Western Conference semifinal playoff game.
In the 2010 playoffs, the Suns had a phenomenal run, even sweeping their arch-nemesis San Antonio Spurs, before falling in the conference finals in a very tight 6-game series. Honestly, against the Lakers, this matchup could have went either way, and this was the best chance they had of reaching the finals. I'm glad the Suns kept Stoudemire to give him one last chance to win the title, even if it was in vain. With his contract expired in 2010, the Suns' ultimate fear came to fruition. Stoudemire walked in free agency, signing with the New York Knicks, so the Suns got nothing for him. In that same summer, Steve Kerr stepped down from his position as GM and basically left the organization. Apparently, it was speculated he had a disagreement on contract terms with the owner Robert Sarver, because 2 weeks before that, Kerr was excited to stay with the team. It must have been a money issue, knowing how cheap Sarver was. So literally 2 of the worst possible outcomes happened for the Suns. They didn't get Curry, and they lost Stoudemire for nothing. Because of that, the Suns missed the playoffs for 10 consecutive years, the longest playoff drought in the history of their franchise. But there's more. In the 2009 draft, the reason the Suns selected Earl Clark with the 14th pick was because they were hoping the trade for Curry would go through. Drew Holiday was still on the board, and according to Steve Kerr, he said, "We liked Holiday a lot. We still had Nash, we had Goran Dragic, who we loved, and we had a potential deal involving Curry. We didn't know what was going to happen, and so you toss all that together, we were thinking, well, we could end up with 4 point guards. Do we take a guy and then just let it sort out later?" The Suns were so close to picking Holiday, and Curry had already been selected, but the Suns were still in discussions with the Warriors to see if the trade could still happen. So instead, they were scared to get too many point guards and chose Earl Clark, a power forward, instead. In hindsight, this was also a horrible choice, as Holiday became an absolute stud, while Clark was completely irrelevant and fell out of the NBA in 5 years. The ramifications of this potential Curry trade was like a domino effect. It affected every single decision the Suns made that offseason. Anyway, that's all folks. Had this draft day trade happened, NBA history will have forever changed the fate of 2 franchises. Perhaps even more, if the Warriors were never a dynasty, maybe other teams like the Rockets or Thunder would have had more titles during that era. What are your thoughts on this trade? How do you see both teams panning out if this trade did happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.